Week 5 of the Overwatch League is officially underway. The West will undergo their final week of spring stage qualifiers, and the East will continue in the knockouts. There's a lot at stake this week. Top seeds, avoiding elimination, big games. It's about to be one heck of a week, so buckle in. To kick off the preview for the week, we've got the Western qualifiers, and Friday starts us off with the London Spitfire versus LA Gladiators, where I'll just cut right to the chase. The London Spitfire right now look horrible. Easily one of the bottom 3 or 4 teams in the West without question. Their gameplay is riddled with mistakes. They're struggling with specific lineup choices, and they lack any sort of comfort in most of the metacomps, if not all of them. The Spitfire looks stuck. They're forcing things instead of playing up to their strengths, and I can't help but wonder if they'll ever change on this current patch. If they can't take a map off of the Titans, and they're struggling to match their Sombra comps, what chance do they possibly have against the Gladiators? This one's a blowout for sure. There's zero need to put any thought into it. Game 2 of Friday is the Vegas Eternal and Atlanta Reign, and you already know the drill from last week. We're knocking 2 birds out with 1 stone. Vegas are getting 3-0'd against Atlanta, and they're getting 3-0'd against Defiant. We're not wasting our time. They showed some improvement last week, which I admit, but their execution is still a long ways off, and there's no way you could possibly count on them in their current state to be consistent. Anyway, next is Washington versus the NYXL. Honestly, New York are a curious case. It feels like a lot of the time they have a decent series, followed by a flop during the week. And with how hard Creative and some of those other boys carried just to get reverse swept by the Shock a couple of weeks ago, these guys are probably pissed and are hungry to get back in the W column, and Washington are by no means invincible. And on a surface level, the rosters don't match up that badly. The support lines have similar levels of potential, the tanks are about even when Kellen does not throw, they have reliable hit scan options. It's just, can the NYXL actually finish the job? I'd say probably not if I was a betting man, because New York have a tendency to choke away winnable games, and I also don't think they have a general answer for alexyOWL, and just based on a general power indicator, Justice are stronger. Think about their matchups with the Shock. Think about the random coaching decisions and the fit substitutions at support. Washington are definitely a lot more consistent, and they tend to beat the lesser opponents pretty easily, so Justice should be taking the win. New York pick up a map or so because, you know, playing angry like this could see them at least play well at the start, but Justice likely stay in control as alexyOWL adds yet another player of the match to his collection. Houston Outlaws versus Florida Mayhem. Oh baby, this is a big one. Circle it as my Western match of the week. The winner of this game in all likelihood is going to avoid the knockouts and advance straight to the mid-season madness. Not to mention that it's a great indicator of who the true top dogs of the West are. And who could forget that we actually will get to witness for the first time this year, Merritt versus his former team. Did the Outlaws make the right choice to move on? Or are the Mayhem the true winners here? It's pretty exciting, and I think from like a style standpoint, both sides are pretty happy with this type of matchup. Houston love to run Winston, but Florida do as well. So Mayhem could probably at least hold their own on paper, because they are in their realm of comfort, and some might argue that since Mayhem are more flexible, they could actually press the advantage depending on the map type and which maps are in the rotation for this game. But for me personally, I prefer Houston, as do most of you I'd assume. Despite being the less flexible roster with less to prove, they're just better. Houston's Tracer Sombra dive is superior in large thanks to Happy, the guy they replaced Merritt with. And with the sheer power of this composition on their side, that could be a problem for the Mayhem, who just don't have the same crisp execution on it. And even if they manage to square up, let's say, it then comes down to your individual mechanics, and in that scenario, advantage also goes to Houston. When you're in a bind, I think that their support line completely changes the outcome of a match way more than RuPaul and Chorong can do. Individually, they just have more of those guys who can pull up the big plays amongst the chaos. Unless they really come out swinging and have a great game plan, I think that the Outlaws will be a bit too much, and let's say they win this in a 5-map series. Something tells me this still somehow ends up being close, just because of how much it means to people like Florida and even Merritt and the potential drama behind it, but the Outlaws have the stronger pieces and a better grasp on the Sombra meta to give them an edge. Saturday begins with Toronto versus London, and you can basically apply what I said for London versus Gladiators and plug it right in here. The Spitfire look very lost, and Defiant, while they don't look that sharp themselves, at least have some of those fundamentals down that London are clearly lacking. Toronto are more so lacking in like the firepower department, and maybe feeling the pressure of the expectations on their shoulders this year with the kind of team they've made, and I just think that there are certain positions and specific compositions that they have the advantage in. It's two different levels of struggle. I got Toronto in a decisive 3-1. Defiant have a backline that is less likely to feed, they have a DPS rotation that they're starting to get more experimental with, and at the very least you know that Defiant have more composition choices at their disposal. The Spitfire's lineup choice, flexibility, and poor awareness makes me very worried. Boston Uprising versus Atlanta Reign. Another game that has potential, right? Boston Uprising on paper have one of the most talented rosters, but thus far they have yet to tap into that true potential and have mostly taken advantage of an easy schedule. They've never played a team as good as this one so far, so now we have to find out if they're up to the task. In a lot of aspects, they actually don't match up that bad, and you feel especially good as a Boston fan when looking at recent performances from Twilight and Decay. Individually, I think that Boston can make a lot of those same clutch plays, but where they have to try and prove themselves is more so with the teamwork. Individual clutches are what this team largely depends on to win games, and I think that's ultimately what'll have them playing 2 or more steps behind the Reign for most, if not all of the series, and why I think Atlanta actually take this pretty convincingly. Atlanta are noticeably better on Sombra comps. I mean, it's not exactly fair to Boston, but also along with that, the follow-up and the teamwork and the mid-game adaptations are in a different league. Boston booms so easily, and Atlanta have shown they can respond to adversity. Lip is just a game changer that no one has figured out so far, and Boston don't really strike me as the team that can draw up those immaculate counter plans. They rely way too much on the mechanics, and that's going to cost them a win. Oh, and by the way, if the Reign prevail over Boston, that in all likelihood does mean they will be achieving the top seed in the West with an undefeated qualifier. So congrats in advance, Atlanta. Things are looking pretty good. Now we're on to San Francisco versus the Florida Mayhem. To shock or not to shock? That is the question. The Shock have continuously disappointed throughout most of this year, and we can't help but wonder when they'll have that breakout game, if ever. Part of me is kind of worried that the Mayhem might end up in a trap game here, but I mostly am confident that they win this one somewhat convincingly. The issue the Shock face when playing the Mayhem is that so many of their players can absolutely kill you. It's such a great collaborative effort from this group week in and week out. You got 2-star DPS, one of the best tanks in the game, 2 incredibly smart supports. The Mayhem are so well-rounded compared to a very one-dimensional Shock. This style of play might find more success against their other opponent this week, but not Florida. Against the Mayhem, it is all hands on deck if you want to win, and right now the Shock have proven they are just not at that level. Too many mistakes from that backline, discomfort on dive compositions, and the lack of consistency spells certain doom for the Shock. Unless they look like a completely different team this week, the Mayhem win with a relatively short series. Vancouver versus Houston. If we follow the trend of the Titans, it's usually these types of matches where they have no answer for the opposing team. It's the top level rosters right now that always give them trouble, and you'd expect a matchup with the Outlaws to be no different, especially with how much is on the line for Houston. The issue with Vancouver is their main comfort picks work even better for Houston. The Titans might have actually figured something out with Sugar-Free swapping to Sombra and having Aspire play the Tracer, but the Outlaws are arguably the league's second best Sombra dive team right now, and the Outlaws more than welcome a faster pace like that, you know? And cause their flex DPS and supports can shine even brighter than that of Vancouver, the Titans are backed into too big of a corner here, so Outlaws all the way. Washington versus the Gladiators. Okay, this one is interesting. Glads thus far have shown to be a more capable team, like for sure, but the Justice have that terrifying underdog mentality with budding confidence. They've been playing pretty well as of late, and they're hungry to earn even more respect. And I'll tell you what, the Gladiators are more than the perfect victim. A confident team that has yet to lose a game that they shouldn't? Sounds like a massive trap game, cause Glads, they're definitely the favorites here. When we break it down, they have the better dive, they possess the higher ceiling, and they have a more versatile backline. By all rights, this should be a Gladiators dub, but my gut keeps telling me that you gotta pick the Justice in a 3-2 surprise. It makes no sense. I really don't have a good reason for you. Maybe I'm doing it just to not have the same old boring Preds, but what I do know is the Gladiators are overdue for a surprising loss. It has been an entire stage and they have managed to avoid this fate completely. Most teams not named Atlanta and Houston have gone through this year, and I think it's about their time because they're not at that level. Justice have all of the tools to make this competitive. They have the right supports to match the aggressive nature of the Gladiators. They have alexyOWL to at least kind of counter Kevster. They have Flora, who's a good match for Yaki on the Sombra, Kai on the Sombra, or even Kai in a pure hitscan duel. alexyOWL and the boys definitely know what's at stake here, and I'm expecting them to bring their A game. They've already shown that they can keep up with a team like the Gladiators thanks to the Pro-Am, and they're a better team than they once were. I'm expecting to probably be wrong here because Gladiators are the better team, but sometimes you just gotta risk it for the biscuit, Next is Boston versus the Shock. I mentioned it earlier in the video, but if the Shock are going to win a game this week, it would probably be this one, as Boston have shown while they are in a better place as a team right now, the reliance on individual play is a problem that will give the Shock a fighting chance because they also play a very similar style right now in the present. In a match like this one, the Shock are going to get less punished for relying on proper so much to literally do everything. There's a world where this game could actually be kind of close. It's one of those situations where all it takes is proper and maybe one other guy playing well enough. But man, I would be lying to you if I said that I think the Shock are going to properly execute, no pun intended. If I had to guess, I'd say that Boston will drop a couple of maps in this series, maybe out of stubbornness, maybe out of not coming to play, but will ultimately show a better coordinated effort when it matters on map 5. Smurf, I think, just provides better consistency at the tank position, and because of how Twilight is playing right now, I don't think that Finn or Vindame really stand a chance. It's Boston's veteran presence that will overwhelm the young guys. Their teamwork may not be god tier either, but it sure as hell beats whatever the heck the Shock are doing. They are one big mess over there, and against a team of vets like this, that ain't gonna fly. And closing out the West is Vancouver versus New York. To once again follow that Vancouver trend, they usually lose to the good teams, but take advantage of the weaker ones. Every win they have gotten this year has come in blowout fashion against teams they're better than, maybe with the exception of Boston. I'll let you be the judge there, but I expect the same thing to happen against New York. Titans are a gatekeeper this year, and the NYXL have a tendency to choke to gatekeepers. The Titans, with no lineup problems and an improving grasp on the meta, should have no issue beating the NYXL in a 3-0. Although I will say that NYXL have at least shown some flashes recently, and if they stop fooling around with this nonsense of Fitz being on support, and Creative maybe has another excellent series, this suddenly could be a winnable matchup for them. But again, NYXL have consistently choked away these opportunities, which is why my expectations are very low. Now for the East knockouts. How about we focus on the lower bracket games first? And first up would be the Seoul Dynasty versus Dreamers. And unfortunately for me, Dreamers kinda stink, and I say for me because I love their team a lot. My boy Dreamer and my boy EasyHan ain't got what it takes here. With how hard they got rolled by Pokerface, a match with Dynasty probably won't go much better. As much as I love that team, last week was rather eye-opening. They're a little too one-dimensional with those Ryan and Winston comps, and Dynasty, while they aren't exactly a great team, definitely have the superior flexibility, which should translate to better success on their map picks, which is why I think they win this one with relative ease. Rhodes versus Pokerface. If you thought the last game wouldn't be close, then this one takes it a step further, as Pokerface swept these guys in the qualifiers earlier this month and nearly took the charge to a map 5 last week to have some momentum. That's a hell of a lot better than anything Rhodes have done so far, and I don't think they could possibly hope to match Pokerface in any sort of standard mirror match. There's a major difference in backline presence, and the Pokerface DPS have shown great consistency, so it should be a simple 3-0 with not much else to discuss. Panthera versus SBG. This one's kind of intriguing. Panthera have a strong veteran core, but have had the misfortune of beating O2 Blast in the first round, while SBG, as an underdog, have looked real good against OWL level teams. Logically speaking, that should mean that SBG are the favorites. but I don't know. That feels too easy. SPG are inconsistent at the core. And I'd argue that last week's results means that they may have peaked early. They got their big dubs, and now there's not much else for them to accomplish. Meanwhile, Panthera are basically fighting for their lives to show the world what they are made of, and I think it's that motivation factor that lets Panthera get the W. I could be wrong there, but what the heck. Next, to round out losers round 1, Shanghai take on O2 Blast. And oh, Shanghai, how unfortunate for you. Last week, you embarrassed your OWL brethren by losing to a contenders team, and now you have to play O2 Blast in a do-or-die situation. And it goes without saying that if they're struggling to beat SBG, who are one of the lowest seeds out of contenders, then O2 Blast should go even worse. O2 showed they very well might have what it takes to win the knockouts completely. If O2 can almost be arguably the best team in APAC, it stands to reason that they will blow out the worst. Now for a quick word on some hypotheticals here in the lower bracket. If things went how I expected them to, O2 would play Panthera, and Dynasty would play Poker Face with a chance to move up to the losers finals. And no matter what happens, at the very least, I think we can all agree that O2 Blast are going to the losers finals in this scenario. Now if Dynasty were to play Poker Face, that could be a bit more interesting. You'd hope that Dynasty would win as the OWL team, but it's not that easy, especially when their team is not stacked by any stretch of the imagination. They're still adjusting to a new DPS player, and their dive needs a lot of work, and are generally quite exposable, which is actually why I'm kind of leaning towards a loss to Poker Face. It's probably in like a 5-map series, but I feel like another OWL team has to lose to a contenders team, like aside from Shanghai, someone else has to take the L. The Dynasty are vulnerable, they're the perfect target, and Poker Face showed us some ferocity last week. I mean, they're one C9 away from beating Guangzhou, and they're showing me that they're a lot more respectable than what I once initially thought. So I'd like to think they actually have a great chance of moving up to the losers finals. Let's move on to the winner side of things with some actual matches. The Hangzhou Spark are going to get their long-awaited rematch with the Guangzhou Charge. And I'll be honest, the Charge looked pretty suspect last week. It took everything they had to defeat Poker Face. And the Spark in that previous loss to Guangzhou were definitely not playing their best Overwatch. If they actually come to play, and if the Charge are showing that they're starting to cool off, this could go a lot differently than the first match. All it takes is a better performance from Leave and Shy, and you never know. Charge have some questions that need to be answered for sure, which is why I think that this could be scary for them, but I still do believe that they will turn things around. Their DPS are more than clutch enough, and Piggy has that ability to at least kinda match Gushwei, while also outplaying him and 20 on off-tank-centric maps. Charge can do this, man. My confidence is not that high, I'm expecting a close game, but Guangzhou were my pick to advance in the A bracket initially, so I'll stay committed to them. So how about we say a Charge victory in a 3-2? And with that, we move towards Dallas versus Infernal. Infernal definitely did not bring their A game against O2 Blast, and some people find that disturbing, and you have to wonder if they possibly are showing signs of inconsistency as they play down to their competition. They're obviously in a better overall place than the Fuel, nobody can deny that, but Burn Blue are starting to show signs of life. They changed their strategy, with MCD constantly playing the Moira and Hanbin rocking the Ramatra, and in classic Fuel and Rush fashion, they're doing things their own way. Fuel have become notorious for finding a strategy then getting hot real quick, and part of me thinks they'll give Seoul Infernal a real scare. When Hanbin is doing his thing out there, when he is fully enabled and the backline can at least hold their own, Dallas are a pretty terrifying opponent, and I would not be surprised to see them win this game or at least make it crazy close. However, I like to believe that Seoul Infernal just played a really good team last week rather than them choking. Maybe that's just copium, but that's how I feel. Additionally, they can play up to the advantage of their map picks and better flexibility. Critically, I'm looking at that flex support diff. Skewed just gives you more options. The Moira thing, while working for Dallas early on, is still not the greatest pick. She's one of the weaker supports in the game, and I think Seoul Infernal can abuse that fact, play around it, and then have MN3 and Zest do the rest. They've proven to be clutch all season this far, more than Sparkle and Edison, and I fully expect that to continue in a Seoul Infernal 3-1W. But I'll tell you, my friends, both of those upper bracket games are looking mighty intriguing, and I kind of feel like an upset could be coming our way. But that basically concludes my thoughts on the East knockouts for the week, and it also means that we have come to the end of yet another preview. What do you think's going to happen this week? Do you think the West qualifiers are going to be wild or tame? And what kind of upsets are we in for in the East, if any? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you want more Overwatch League content just like this. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.